This is one of the structures on Calton Hill at the end of Edinburgh's main streets, overlooking the city. Now, there were quite a few of these sorts of things built. They were called follies, and they were the sort of thing that often wealthy people would build on their estates to give a hint of Roman Empire or Greek classical sculpture and culture. But there is a collection of them that is a most interesting part of the town, of the city, to visit, and well worth the walk up there. So it's basically a ring of Corinthian columns on a platform, on a round platform. And I thought there were a few challenges in this that would make it an relatively simple but interesting daily drawing practice exercise. And it's the sort of thing that can be difficult to get looking right first take, surprisingly so. And therefore it is a good thing to practice because we can do it several times in a relatively short period of time. There was one thing that didn't work out here for me in my drawing, and at the end I do something that I've never done before with one of my drawings, partly out of interest to see how it worked. And if you hang around till the end, you'll see what that is. I don't think I'll be bothering with it again, but it was interesting to give it a go. But at this point, I'm trying to really just position the column. So I draw the central closest column as my first object to use to establish a sense of proportion and scale. So I'm seeking to get it in proportion, firstly, to the columns in the reference. So the ratio of width to height being the same. It's a relatively slender column. My column is just a little bit too fat. However, I'll live with that. It's good, however, to notice it, because then I'm aware of something that perhaps next time I need to take more care with. And it also establishes the sense of scale. So I will now reference off this column for the rest of the drawing, but I am seeking to keep it pretty much the same size as my reference. Now, this structure gives us some practice at perspective for curved lines, for circular shapes and ellipses, basically. Now, eye level is obviously somewhere down low on the pedestal, and as our horizontal lines move upwards, the perspective theory tells us that they become more and more rounded. So if we look at the first obvious horizontal lines that go around the structure, there are some of those pseudo block lines in the base. We can see that they're almost horizontal, but not quite. There is a slight upward curve, and as each of those lines move upwards, if we go to the top silhouette of that roof cover line, we can see that it's much more rounded, and all of those lines that are horizontal but in effect are a circle, if we were to look down on them, become slightly more rounded as it moves higher from eye level. So that's what we have to line up for. And any architectural elements that also line up on the horizontals, such as, say, the base of the capitals, they also will fit into this ellipse pattern of the part of the ellipse that we see becoming fuller and fuller in its curvature as it moves away from ground level. And starting with that first column, I then move left and right, and this is where we have to just look a little bit carefully and think, okay, to the left of that central column, I can see about a bit more than half, a bit less than 2/3 of a column, and then there's the gap. So I draw the gap rather than position the column, and then I position that next column, and then we see most of a column peeking out from behind that column we've just drawn. And then I do the same thing in the other direction. So when I'm positioning columns such as this, I draw the gap as much as I draw the columns. And I find that works accurately enough for me. So now I'm going up, and you'll see that line I've just drawn is actually flatter than the curvature. It's not as curved as the lines beneath it, which is why it doesn't look right. It's why it looks a bit awkward because following the perspective theory, it should be rounder, not flatter. And the reason that's the case is that it comes up too high on the ends, on the corners. I don't know. It's just, it's a sort of and I'm aware of it now. So now I'm trying to make it look less obvious by pushing that center part up a bit. And if that still hasn't worked. So I push it up a little bit further, and then I have to push up that little finial on top a little bit, which I do in a moment. Yep, I'm thinking, no, I'm not happy with that. That's not looking any good at all. And because this is a daily drawing practice, this is the exact sort of drawing where we push and we play around and we make corrections, and we're not worried about spoiling what we've done. It's just a quick, whatever, 10, 20-minute drawing in the first place. And the idea is to have a chance to practice, to experiment, to refine. And if we leave the wrong line in place, we don't learn what it feels like to put the correct curvature, the correct angle in place. So I'm thinking, well, it looks better with the top going up. It doesn't look like it's been, scalped on the top or anything. But the ends don't sit right. They clearly stick out when they should curve around and under. So I'm not happy with that. I decide, though, I'm not going to start again. I keep telling people not to, and I don't want to either. So I'm thinking about what I can do with that. If I made that top part much larger, I could, in effect, consume all of my lines that aren't quite right within a line that is correct, and then redefine the top. But I would significantly be changing the proportions of the top part then. And I'd be bringing it out way too much on each side as well to accommodate that. So these are all the things that went through my head as to how I might address this. And sometimes not putting more ink on the paper in that particular problem area really is the best solution. So now there is some sort of urn in the center that if we were angled differently, we might see much more clearly, but because of this angle, we have a column going right down the middle of it. And on one side, it's silhouetted against the sky, so therefore it looks very dark. But on the other side, it's got one of the columns behind it, and therefore the column appears darker, and so the urn appears lighter. And if we notice that before we start just whacking hatch lines everywhere, then we have a chance to incorporate that effect, that visual effect, into our drawing. And there are some very tiny glimpses of light coming through some parts of where these columns are joined, because the columns aren't exactly straight lined. They flare out slightly. Corinthian columns flare out very slightly towards the base. Doric columns more obviously so, and Ionic columns I think generally are slender and straight-sided. I keep looking at the top thinking, can I put a mark or a dot or just refine a different line that will make the top look not so bad. Wishful thinking, Stephen. Never mind though, now we've got the base, and I make the mistake for a moment of, again, because I've stopped paying attention as much as I should, and I'm not observing my reference, and I actually start to make these lines as they go down rounder still. I just got used to drawing rounder lines, and now I suddenly realize, oh man, they're meant to be getting straighter, moving more towards the horizontal. So I had to redefine a bit of what I've done. And then again, I was almost going to start going down before I'd gone out wide enough. And again, that is the sort of thing that happens when we start to go on autopilot. We've looked enough at this drawing, at this reference, to think, oh, I know what this is now. but we actually don't know in exact enough detail to get the overall proportions correct. And that, I think, really is the danger spot in lack of observation. We do have a strong sense of how it's built, and we could describe it to someone quite well, but we haven't really got the detail that we need to get the proportions exact enough for drawing it. And so I nearly made the base too narrow. I've possibly made it slightly too wide on the right hand side, but it's, I think, close enough. Now, this is in the 10 minutes of real-time drawing speed. In a moment, we will switch to 4 times drawing speed for the rest of the hatching. If you're finding this interesting, please hit the like button for me. That helps me out. But if you'd like to see the sped up part at real-time drawing speed, then use that cog icon and you can reduce it to quarter speed, and then you can watch it at my drawing speed. Or you could reduce it to half speed and watch it at double time. So I'm just delineating this fence, and now we hit sped up time. So 0.2 millimeter Copic multiliner is my pen. I draw on 210 GSM drawing cartridge, which is not a dead smooth surface, but it is relatively smooth. It's certainly not, certainly doesn't have enough teeth for watercolor, but it does work quite well with ink, and that's why I started using this, because it worked well with the ink from the Copic sketch markers. So a few figures, a little more detail. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do in terms of hatching. I wasn't going to hatch particularly. I was going to finish it more looking like this, but I decided to keep playing around with it and get more of that silhouette effect that we have in the reference, because the visual effect of not darkening the columns creates a very different feel to my drawing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I thought it was worth having a go. Now here you see me doing some foliage for this tree. I'm a great fan of foliage that frames architecture, and it's surprising how often it actually just happens. You don't have to go very hard to try and put a tree in the picture. So this very quick. So it really is I think very handy to develop a way of capturing the effect of the trees in whatever style you like to draw relatively quickly, because it does mean we can add, I think, a very transforming thing to our drawing. And there I am doing the lines. And here's the thing I've never done before. I have this Copic, I don't know, white ink that I just used to soften that left-hand corner, and doesn't that look much better? I must make sure I get that right next time, first time. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you give this daily drawing a go. You'll find the reference on my channel community page if you want to print off a hard copy. But however you do it, whatever you do, however it turns out, whether you use white ink or not, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.